On August 6, 1945, a white flash lit up the sky over Hiroshima. In an instant, the entire city was blown away. 80,000 people died immediately. Tens of thousands of others were burned to ashes in a sea of flames. 3 days later, a similar tragedy occurred in Nagasaki. But the strange thing was that Japan had not yet surrendered. The whole world believed that it was the 2 atomic bombs that forced Japan to end the war. But was that really the reason? In 1941, Japan was like a raging storm sweeping through Asia. After attacking Pearl Harbor, the Japanese military quickly expanded its territory, capturing the colonies of Britain, the Netherlands, and France. In less than a year, Japan controlled more than 20% of the world's population. But while the world saw a powerful empire, inside Japan there was an extreme ideology. Bushido, the way of the warrior, which was the spirit of the samurai, was turned by the military into a propaganda tool. For them, death for the country was glory, while surrender was the most shameful thing. The Japanese military was ready to fight to the end, even knowing that they could not win. Meanwhile, the United States was also in a dilemma. Japan had lost strategically, but they still refused to surrender. After pushing the Japanese out of the Pacific, the US faced the biggest question of the war: how to end it. A direct invasion of Japan could kill millions of American soldiers and Japanese civilians. In the Battle of Okinawa, the Japanese fought to the last man, and thousands of civilians jumped off cliffs to commit suicide rather than be captured. If the US had to capture every Japanese city, the war would drag on for many more years. The US also tried blockading and firebombing. Tokyo was burned to the ground in one night, killing more than 100,000 people. But Japan still did not surrender. At this time, another option appeared: the atomic bomb. A weapon with terrible destructive power, capable of wiping out a city in seconds. For President Harry Truman, this may be the only way to end the war without invasion. On August 6, 1945, the first bomb, named Little Boy, was dropped on Hiroshima. The city was blown away in an instant. But surprisingly, the Japanese government still did not surrender. 3 days later, the US dropped a second bomb on Nagasaki. At this time, an even more important event happened. The Soviet Union declared war on Japan and sent 1.6 million troops into Manchuria. This was the real decisive blow. Japan had always hoped that the Soviet Union could mediate a peace with the Allies. But when the Red Army crossed the border, they understood that all roads were cut off. Japan not only faced the US, but also the Soviet Union, an uncompromising enemy. For a long time, Japan believed that the Soviet Union could help them negotiate a favorable peace treaty, as the two countries had maintained a neutrality pact since 1941. The Japanese government had repeatedly sent secret representatives to contact Moscow for negotiations. But these efforts never yielded results, because Stalin had other plans. Immediately after Nazi Germany collapsed in May 1945, the Soviet Union began moving troops to the east. Stalin did not want to maintain peace with Japan. He wanted to seize this territory before the US ended the war. At midnight, on August 8th, just 1 day after the atomic bomb fell on Nagasaki, the Soviet Union officially declared war on Japan. The Red Army crossed the border, attacking directly into Manchuria, defeating the Kwantung Army units in just a few days. Japan had no chance to resist. They had devoted all their resources to fighting the US,
so most of the troops in Manchuria were abandoned. Within a week, the Soviet Union controlled the entire region. They also began to advance into Korea, Sakhalin, and the Kuril Islands. At this moment, the Japanese leadership began to panic. The Japanese Supreme Council, also known as the Big Six, was still divided. Half wanted to continue fighting, half realized that they could not prolong the war any longer. War Minister Anami and the generals still believed that Japan could defeat the US in a final battle. But others, like Prime Minister Suzuki and Foreign Minister Togo, knew that it was impossible. They held emergency meetings, arguing for hours, but no one would budge. At this moment, an important figure appeared. Emperor Hirohito! Throughout the war, Hirohito only played a symbolic role. But on August 14th, 1945, he did something unprecedented in history. He intervened directly in politics. He summoned the Japanese Supreme Council and demanded that the political and military leaders make a final decision. This was an unprecedented move. Throughout Japanese history, the emperor never directly participated in political meetings. He only had the role of a god, a person who bestowed blessings and maintained a neutral position. But this time, Hirohito understood that if he did not speak up, Japan would be completely destroyed. The meeting took place in a tense atmosphere. One faction supported surrender, the other wanted to fight to the end. The military generals still believed that a final battle could save the situation. But even after ordering the surrender, Hirohito still faced another danger. The extremist military generals did not want to obey. Some officers planned a coup, assassinate the pro-surrender politicians, and destroy the recording of the emperor's declaration. Hirohito had foreseen this. He hid the recording in a secret safe in the imperial palace and ordered the guards to protect it at all costs. When the rebel officers stormed the palace, they could not find the recording. Their plan completely failed. The next day, at noon on August 15th, 1945, for the first time in history, the Japanese people heard the emperor's voice over the radio. He announced Japan's unconditional surrender, ending the most brutal war in history. Hirohito's intervention not only helped Japan avoid complete destruction, but also kept the country from falling into the hands of the Soviet Union. If he had not acted, the war could have dragged on for many more months. Even Japan could have been divided like Germany or Korea. He not only saved Japan from defeat, but also shaped the future of this nation after the war. The emperor's surrender order ended all debate. Japan sent a note accepting the Potsdam Declaration with the sole condition: Hirohito would remain on the throne. On August 15th, 1945, for the first time in history, the Japanese people heard the emperor's voice over the radio. In his speech, Hirohito announced Japan's surrender and called on the people to endure the unendurable. This was not only an announcement of the end of the war, but also a shock to millions of Japanese. For many years, they believed that the emperor was an invincible god. But now, that god had accepted defeat. Although the war ended, the consequences it left behind were extremely severe. More than 3 million Japanese people died. Tens of millions lost their homes. Major cities like Tokyo, Osaka, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki were razed to the ground. 70% of the infrastructure was destroyed, the economy was exhausted, and famine was rampant. Japan was once a military power, but now they were only a pile of ashes. On September 2nd, 1945, Japan officially signed the Instrument of Surrender on the USS Missouri. At the ceremony, the Japanese representative bowed and signed the document in the presence of Allied generals. This was the moment that marked the end of World War II, the most devastating war in human history. But for Japan, this was not only the end of the war, but also the beginning of a new and turbulent chapter. Immediately after the surrender, the United States began occupying Japan. General Douglas MacArthur was appointed Supreme Commander of the Allied forces, and he carried out an unprecedented reform in the history of this country. The military government was dissolved, and all fascist parties were banned. A new constitution was drafted, turning Japan into a democratic nation, which included an important clause. Japan renounced the right to wage war, and the military was disbanded. Emperor Hirohito remained on the throne, but he was forced to declare to the entire nation that he was no longer a god. This was a huge shock to the Japanese people, but it also helped them enter a new era. Under the supervision of the United States, Japan transformed from a militarist nation into a peaceful and rapidly developing economy. In just 3 decades, Japan became one of the world's leading economic powers. Looking back, many people believe that the atomic bomb was the reason Japan surrendered. But the reality is not that simple. The Soviet Union's entry into the war put an end to all of Japan's hopes. They understood that if they continued to fight, the country could be divided and completely destroyed. More importantly, it was Emperor Hirohito who made the decision that changed Japan's destiny. If he had not intervened, the war could have dragged on for many more months, causing millions of casualties. This is the real reason why Japan surrendered. Looking back, many people believe that the atomic bomb was the reason Japan surrendered. But the reality is not that simple. The 2 atomic bombs certainly caused terrible damage, but it was the Soviet Union's entry into the war that delivered the final blow to Japan's hopes. Before that, the Japanese leadership still harbored illusions of a peaceful solution through Moscow. When the Red Army poured into Manchuria, they understood that all doors were closed. If they did not surrender immediately, Japan would not only face the devastation of the United States, but also risk being invaded by the Soviet Union and divided like Germany or Korea. More importantly, it was Emperor Hirohito who made the decision that changed Japan's destiny. If he had not intervened, the war could have dragged on for many more months, causing millions of casualties. But this decision did not come from compassion or pacifism. Hirohito accepted the surrender to maintain his throne and preserve the existence of the emperor's regime. In a historic moment, he was willing to sacrifice national honor for the survival of the country. World War II ended, but it was not only the end of a war, but also the beginning of a new world order. Japan, from a militarist empire, became a democratic and economically developed nation. But the price they had to pay was millions of lives, cities razed to the ground, and a complete change in national identity. In the end, Japan did not surrender just because of the atomic bomb. They surrendered because they had no other choice. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more in-depth explorations of history. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.